we'll have a couple we'll have a couple of times where we have a chance to interact with one another, um, and for those who want to stay online and listen to the homily that I prepared after all that, then you're welcome to do so. And if not, that's fine too. Um, let's start with some opening words and a chalice lighting. These words come to us from Joy Atkinson, a Unitarian Universalist minister. The womb of stars embraces us. Remnants of their fiery furnaces pulse through our veins. We are of the stars, the dust of explosions cast across space. We are of the earth. We breathe and live in the breath of ancient plants and beasts. Their cells nourish our soul. We build our communities on their harvest of gifts. We are part of the great circle of life, of humanity, gathered around the fire, the hearth, the altar, the screen. And we gather anew to celebrate our common heritage.
That was good.
So I will ask everybody to mute if they can. Anna will try to do that if sounds come out, but we're grateful for Anna's presence this morning as our tech host. And I also welcome all 53 of us who are online together this morning. Thank you so much. We are at the end of a particularly difficult week. And so in the beginning of this service, I want to talk a little bit about that and also open up the floor to hopefully a very controlled question and response from anyone who would like to share. The events of the week that have transpired since this past Monday have been difficult to witness in many ways. Some of us look at these things with interest and a sigh. Some of us look to them with great sorrow and concern. Some have a sense of loss, a sense of foreboding, certainly a fear for others and for ourselves, concern about what freedoms will be restricted, not only among people who live on the margins, but those of us who feel that we're sort of part of the mainstream. There were some bright moments on the national front this week, but the one that caught everyone's attention was when Episcopal Bishop Marianne Budd spoke directly to the president and asked him to act with mercy for those in our nation who are marginalized and experiencing great fear right now. Bishop Budd was certainly aware of the mood of the day, the exhilaration of those who were participating in the inaugural. And even then wondered if anyone else other than herself might say something that would provide a moment of thought, at least. And then seeing that that didn't happen, she stepped into her moment. And it was a moment of transcendence, I think, for her. And since then, she hasn't wavered in the face of criticism. She said later that I did my best to try and speak to present an alternative to the culture of contempt and to say that we can bring multiple perspectives into a common space and do so with dignity and respect. More than 14,000 people signed an online petition within 4 hours supporting and thanking Bishop Budd for her words and for stepping into that moment. So in a sense, it was a moment of transcending the expected. Later on, my homily today is about transcendence, sort of spiritual experiences, but I also do so in the context of this present moment. So I hope some of you will stay around for that. For now, I'm interested in hearing from you. And I know that each one of us is feeling some degree of angst around our nation's situation right now. And I think we need to have an opportunity to express that. If we were in service together, we would be able to be doing that prior to the service and after during coffee hour to just share our feelings and concerns. I don't know if everybody has the wherewithal, the ability, the knowledge to raise your hand electronically, but if you do and you'd like to share, here's what I'm looking for in terms of a very please, a very brief response from anyone who wants to speak is, first of all, think about a moment in your life where you have been able to transcend what you even expected of yourself. Um, I really am not looking for people's expression of concern or fear or anger. I think we all feel those things, and I know we share a lot of that. What I'm hoping that you might do is think about where in your past you have, in fact, moved beyond that fear and spoken truth to power, done something that went beyond what was expected, even within yourself, and what that felt like. So, if anybody has anything that they want to share around those lines, I'm looking for volunteers, and if you can raise your hand electronically, or if you want to turn on your video and raise your hand in actuality, then I hope you might do that. I know no one was really ready for this question, but think about it. All right, Jane, you're up first. You need to unmute. There you go.
Yes. There was a time many years ago in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic that I was working at a college, and an advisor that I'd hired died of AIDS, which was very quickly over a Thanksgiving break. I was putting together an advisor's manual, and I wanted to have a dedication page to him because he worked in my advising center. The dean didn't allow it. And I went to another dean, and she said, he'll make up some excuse why this is not going to be allowed. And he did. He said that he thought that they should be honoring a secretary who'd worked there for a long time and so forth. Anyway, at graduation, they did honor that secretary. And I went back to him and I said, I'd like, there'll be revisions to the handbook. I want to put him back in. And he hemmed and he hawed. He didn't think I'd remember that he had that obstacle, because that was in April and now we're in October. And he couldn't say anything. So I was able, with my revisions, to put that dedication back into Brian, who had died of AIDS.
Thank you.
That was my
That's
one
great.
time.
That's great. Anyone else? We're talking about moments where you have transcended a particular time in your life where you've gone beyond what you thought you might do or what others expected of you to do. And we're reflecting on Bishop Marion Budd's comments during the service on Inauguration Day, and her moving into that moment and transcending it in some serious way. Anybody else have something that they might want to share along those lines?
Tony, Beth George put up her hand.
Okay, Beth. No? Okay. Well, if you do, unmute and let us know. But I'm sure, Beth, that you have, in your experience, done many things that took a little bravery, a little courage, and felt and felt good to do. And I think that's part of the package there, is that we really fear maybe stepping into that moment, and yet when we do, something happens within us, and we are granted the courage and the bravery and the voice to speak. Anyone else raise your hand or raise your electronic hand? In the process, let me share that I'm so happy to see so many folks here, and grateful for all of you to your presence this morning. Anyone else? Eleanor, you need to unmute and go ahead. And then Joanne.
Well, a year
Shall I
ago,
go?
we had our annual meeting of our condo association, and the president said he was willing to continue on the board, but not to be president. And I was on the board, but very anonymous. And one by one, all the other board members said they wouldn't be president. And so somebody nominated me, and it was just out of the blue. I didn't expect to be president of the condo, and I had to. And they said, "Are you willing to do it?" And I said, "Well, I guess so." Whereupon the former president turned on me with hostility and said, you know, and for the whole year, I was pestered by nasty emails from this person. And so the transcending was, first of all, that I was able to be president. I learned how to do it, and I did it. And at the end of the year, I had to stand up at the annual meeting and somehow speak truths to this nasty person who had a lot of power, who was tall and male and loud, and say what I thought without incriminating myself. So that was my experience.
All right, thanks. Joanne, want to unmute?
Oh, am I okay now?
No, I
Oh,
got
I'm sorry.
it.
Can
you hear me? Can you hear me?
Joanne.
Can you hear
Hold
me?
on. Everybody needs to mute except Joanne Husky, if you would, please. And then if you have a thought you'd like to share, try to raise your hand electronically or otherwise. And Anna, Anne, you can see if there's other people who are raising their hands. That'd be great. Joanne, go ahead.
So I lived in Kenya when the American embassy was blown up by Al Qaeda. And after that, the Kenyan press and the Kenyan people were extremely anti-American. They were angry at America for being there and for causing all this pain and death among their people. And so there were a lot of editorials, a lot of vitriol on the news everywhere. And I was the head of the American Women's Association. So I decided I took out a full page ad in the Kenya newspaper saying that the American people supported the Kenyan people and that we were all victims in this disaster, and that we were going to start a bomb relief fund to support Kenyans who were hurt. And so I started a relief fund, and we raised a lot of money, and we worked with a lot of Kenyans who were hurt. But the moment that was the biggest overcoming was when Richard Leakey, who many of you may know who he is, he's an anthropologist, wrote a really vitriolic editorial about Americans. And I called him up and said, you know, I talked to him saying, you know, you can't say that, we are all together in this. And he publicly apologized, wrote another editorial, and there was a definite melting of that complete fallout between Americans and Kenyans. So it made a big difference. And I was afraid when I did it, but I did it. So
Thank you. Harriet and Sylvia, did you have your hand up? Okay. Harriet.
Yeah, let me do it. I just put my audio on. I went to social work school at Columbia from 64 to 66. Michael Schwerner had been in social work school. He's one of the 3 that were killed in Mississippi in 64. His father came to the university, to our graduate school, and asked us to go to Mississippi. So I went to Mississippi summer of 65. I worked a little bit with voting rights, very hard down there, but I worked primarily with Child Development Group of Mississippi. It was a precursor for one of the federal programs. And I found a lot of children who were very bright and had no opportunities whatsoever, a lot of Black kids. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do about this? And besides the work of, because I knew when we left, there would be no further education for these little ones. So I went to the guy who was supposed to be the director of human services welfare, as they called it then. and I decided I would go talk to him. I was very frightened, but I talked to him and I told him, for example, we had one boy who was a psychologist had come from Washington and said that he was really brilliant. We needed to do everything possible for him. And I said, his mother lives in a shack with 6 other kids. I said, can they get welfare? And he got very angry with me and used the N-word, etc. But I at least felt that I had tried. And now I looked, it was Holly Springs, Mississippi, and now I look back and I look on the website to see what happened to it. And the mayor is Black. The deputy police chief is Black. Things do change over time. They do. And Mississippi is still a hard place to be in for a Black person, without a doubt.
Great.
So that's it. That's my story. And how did I feel? I was frightened.
Yeah. And afterwards?
Afterwards, I was glad that I had done it. I was glad that I had done it. And I hope there was some piece of him, like we hope there's some piece of Trump that has some humanity.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jane notes in her comment in the chat that she was fired the spring after her actions, and but Anne, as usual, chimed in and says she knows that she kept speaking up for what she believed in. So that, I think, what I'm trying to get at is that in various points in our lives, we've either wanted to deeply wanted to say something and maybe felt we couldn't overcome those fears that we have, or we have said something and have felt really good about it despite the consequences. And I think what I wanted to do is to get your memories going towards transcending a moment and thinking about how this moment in time for us nationally, we might be able to transcend. And part of the focus on my sermon on sort of spiritual experience, transcendence, is really getting to the heart, the deep part of that ability to transcend the moment. So let's take a deep breath. Thank you very much, anyone who shared. I do want to provide an opportunity for true joys and sorrows this morning, an opportunity for you to share something that you are experiencing personally, an individual you'd like to bring forward and have us hold in our hearts, something of the sort of the everyday joys and sorrows that each one of us goes through. So if you have a joy, a personal joy or personal sorrow you'd like to share this morning, again, open up your video and perhaps unmute yourself and raise your hand, and we'll call on you. Anybody, joys and sorrows? First of all, I do want to share a couple of things. First of all, we had a wonderful memorial service at Bentley Villages yesterday for a member of our congregation who hasn't been particularly visible recently, Kathy Harrick. Kathy was a member of the congregation a number of years ago and then moved to California, joined the Unitarian Church of Mount Diablo out in Walnut Creek, and then more recently returned with her husband Tom back to Naples. And Kathy passed away a couple of weeks ago, and we celebrated her life yesterday at Bentley. The other thing I want to share is the passing of Frank Napo. Frank was not a member of the congregation, but his wife Gabrielle was. She's a wonderful potter and has created a couple of our chalices that we use in front of the sanctuary on Sunday mornings. Frank was a wonderful curmudgeon-y activist who pushed really hard to create change in Immokalee, especially. He headed up the Immokalee Housing and Family Services for a long time. That was an organization that our congregation supported for a number of years. His passing leaves a little gap in the activist community here in Southwest Florida. So we honor Frank today. Gabrielle hopes to be with us in sanctuary next Sunday. So any other joys and sorrows this morning? Anne?
Good morning. Just wanted to share something that really made me feel good this week. I have the privilege of facilitating support groups for the Parkinson's Association of Southwest Florida, which is a great organization, provide a lot of services for folks living with Parkinson's as well as their caregivers. One of the groups I facilitate, and I really don't facilitate, I just basically show up and on Zoom, and the folks in the group just do a great job of co-facilitating. One of the men who has Parkinson's, who is preparing for some surgery unrelated to his Parkinson's, had a very life-threatening event this week. He had a severe stroke, ended up in ICU, was intubated on a ventilator. The really great news is that he's off the ventilator, is no longer intubated, and is able to communicate with his wife and family. But it also, so I was just so grateful for some good news this week. But it was also the love and the support among that support group. Most of it happening via text, although maybe some of it was happening with phone calls that I wasn't aware of. But just the power of community and caring. It just gave me a good feeling.
Awesome. Thank you.
And sorry, did you mean to share your screen?
When you say my screen,
Yeah, if this is
Okay,
something at the
I
top of
got
your
my
screen
answer.
that says stop sharing. So
you can see my screen is a total mess.
No,
But
it's-
I know what everything is.
all right. All right, great. Thank you. Anyone else? If you're, I can't see everybody, so if you're interested, unmute and speak up. Otherwise, we'll move forward.
I looked at everybody. I don't see anyone with hands up or videos.
Well, thank you for those who shared. I know, I'm certain that within this virtual space and across our community, there are folks who are experiencing both joy and sorrow on this day. And so we honor those moments of joy, those moments of sorrow, and hold you all in our hearts and in the warmth of this community. I have a meditation to share, if you will. This comes from the Reverend Naomi King. Naomi served in Florida for a few years in the early 2000s, and she's the daughter of Stephen King, the author, and has served as a Unitarian Universalist minister and continues to serve in an online ministry, as well as many other things that she does. This meditation is titled A Day by Reverend Naomi King. A day. Do we really apprehend what a day is? Do we really feel its importance? Do we know its capacity? It has risen upon us from the great depth of eternity, girt round with wonder, emerging from the womb of darkness, a new creation of life and light, brought into being by what? God? Physics? A day. In itself one entire and perfect sphere of space and time, filled and then emptied of the sun. Every past generation is represented in it. It is the flowering of all history. And in so much it is richer and better than all the other days which have preceded it. And we have been recreated to new opportunities with new powers, called to this utmost promontory of actual time, this centering of all converging life. a day. And it is for today's work we have been endowed. It is for this that we have been blessed with minds, hearts, and hands. The sum of our entire being is concentrated here. And today is all the time we absolutely have. Celebrate today, this day. So I have prepared a homily for today, and I hope that it's worthy of the moment. It was something that's been in the works since last summer when I sort of set a tentative schedule of services. And as always, I've tried to fit it not only to those themes that we sort of create out of a number of possibilities, but also to the moment. So my sermon today is on transcendence, originally titled A Science and Transcendence, and there's a little bit of that as well. And I chose for today's reading a section from one of the most well-known poems of the Romantic era by William Wordsworth, lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey. And I wanted to share these lines because in them, I think Wordsworth was able to express as closely as I think possible a moment of transcendence. He wrote, "And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of the setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore, I am still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains and of all that we behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature and in the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being." I have in the past tried to share my own similar experiences when caught up in a moment, boundaries dissolved, cares disappeared, time went away, my spirits were elevated to the point where there wasn't any I there, only an experience of joyous oneness, visceral, very real. And experiences like this, whether they've taken place in nature or in community, are a significant part of who I am and provide great meaning and purpose. Everything, I think, in my life revolves around that felt sense of connection. It's my moral grounding, my North Star. It is my own confirmation of what we talk about when we talk about interdependence, a felt sense of interdependence. And two, there are briefer moments of connection experienced throughout my days and weeks that lift and sustain me in my work. Moments when I witness an act of love or generosity, or times when I'm allowed to see more deeply into someone's pain or loneliness, or even when a piece of music moves me out of the commonplace. And I suspect that many of you, if not all, have had moments much like these. Even in the smallest sense, think of those simple moments when you would say something like, "Oh, that's so wonderful, it gives me goosebumps." Those are the little moments I'm talking about on a simple and small scale like that, or on a much grander scale. In his book, Religion, Values, and Peak Experiences, psychologist Abraham Maslow wrote, "One of the great lessons from the true mystics is that the sacred is in the ordinary, that it's to be found in one's daily life, in one's neighbors, friends, and family, in one's backyard." Maslow, at first believing that religious experience was more rare than common, was ultimately amazed that the majority of people he interviewed could describe what he called a peak experience, or even a longtime spiritual practitioner. One doesn't have to be a great teacher or even a longtime spiritual practitioner to undergo an unforgettable epiphany during daily living. Sometime before Maslow, American philosopher and psychologist William James, in his lectures on mysticism that he gave as part of a seminal study in the varieties of religious experience, talked about the four qualities of the mystical or transcendent experience that are common even as the circumstances and descriptions of those episodes, those individual episodes, vary quite a bit. The first thing was that such experiences are transient in nature, most lasting no more than a few seconds, a few minutes, and only in rare cases lasting more than an hour. And yet, while the intensity of the experience is short-lived, its richness and importance tend to be sustained within the inner life of an individual, especially when it's reinforced by additional similar experiences. The second thing that James discovered was that while these experiences are passive in nature, there are some practices that can facilitate a transcendent moment. James remarked that for the most part, these experiences, though come unannounced, fade just as capriciously. They're passive. We can't necessarily call them, unfortunately, to come to us. The other two qualities that he pointed out were more interesting to James. The third quality was that these experiences are ineffable, that words, despite Wordsworth and perhaps my own clumsy attempts, words really cannot come close to capturing the richness of an intensity of the felt experience. James thought that trying to explain the transcendent experience was something akin to trying to explain love to someone who has never felt love. Finally, that such an experience, with such an experience often comes a depth of understanding or insight into a truth, often, though not always, expressed as the unity of all things. A truth not accessible by the rational intellect, but which nonetheless tends to carry a powerful and continuing sense of authority in the mind of the experiencer, the subject. Nowhere in these qualities is there anything suggesting explicitly that these experiences involve anything supernatural, only that they are a unique expression of the our ever-expanding understanding of human cognition. The past couple of weeks, I've been looking into what current science
They're
says.
recording the service too.
Please mute. So these past few weeks, I've been looking into what current science says about what's going on in our brains when these transcendent moments arise. And the truth is that while there are a lot of studies that have continued to look at the qualitative and quantitative impacts of these things, and now looking at trying to understand the science of experience such as these, work and studies at places like Johns Hopkins and the University of Minnesota, there is still a lot that is not known about this phenomenon. There are studies focused on neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and I was going to say OxyContin, but it's oxytocin, that may be involved in spiritual experiences. There have been studies using MRIs that show increased activity in the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes in the limbic system during spiritual experiences, suggesting that these areas may play a role in creating those states. There's evidence to suggest that repeated spiritual practices like meditation can change the structure and function of the brain over time, making it more prone to spiritual experiences. And I was just reading this week, there are interesting studies that focus on a more significant relationship between the heart and the brain, the heart's rhythm and electromagnetic field, and the communication that happens back and forth between the brain and the mind might have some impact on our mental health and perhaps on spiritual experiences. And there are studies within the field of quantum biology that may have an impact on our understanding not only of spiritual experiences, but of our ability to think, to be the thinking creature, our consciousness. And still, not a particularly strong understanding of what triggers these experiences. For my part, the only thing I can add is that I don't think we can experience such elevated feelings if we haven't also experienced something of the opposite, of deep sorrow and pain. As another poet, William Blake, wrote, "Joy and sorrow are woven fine." We live our lives sometimes in highs and sometimes in lows, as we talk about every week. Now, Unitarian Universalists tend to be a skeptical group. We hold back from attributing too much significance to things that seem non-rational. From the very beginning, our Unitarian forebears have urged the careful use of reason in reflecting on any experience or any text relating to faith or belief. We're cautious when it comes to feelings and felt experiences. And two, for many Unitarian Universalists, one of the important defining characteristics of our movement has been the demystification of religion, moving as much as possible superstition out of the center of our conversations. And yet, our roots also run deep in the earthy, mystical, non-rational inclination of the transcendentalists, like Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, and many others. Their tangible legacy can still be found in our UUA values and covenants. There it is, stated that direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. That these experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. Margaret Fuller, certainly one of the brightest of the Concord literary firmament, clearly appreciated the fact that we humans are much more than our intellect. In her first book, Summer on the Lakes, published in 1843, Fuller uses a wonderful little dialogue between four muses to argue that transcendence is not about moving beyond physical reality, but of attentiveness to the reality of life. All around us, she wrote, lies what we neither understand nor use. Our capacities, our instincts for this, our present sphere, are but half developed. Let us confine ourselves to that till the lesson be learned. Let us be completely natural before we trouble ourselves with the supernatural. Like Fuller, I've never had any sense that transcendent experiences point towards anything other than our own human capacity to move beyond the internal boundaries we create and to experience more fully our intuitively our fully natural connection and interdependence with other living creatures, other human beings, with the earth in all its beauty. The problem, I think, is that over time, the internal and the external boundaries we create become more and more difficult to transcend. One of my colleagues, the Reverend Yvonne Sohan, writes about the transcendent experiences of her youth when she would stand and gaze at the starry firmament and contemplate infinity. And in those moments, feel the boundary of time dissolve and her spirit expand to fill the universe. Transcendent moments where all fear and anxiety and anguish disappeared. But Yvonne also writes about the fact that with time, transcending boundaries has become much more difficult. More and more, my own fears were with me, she writes. As I reached adulthood and encountered others, more and more I was aware of the boundaries of race, class, age, and sex. I felt myself cringe as the bantering youth in the street came nearer. I felt myself become tearful as I encountered a senior citizen living with pain or the limited choices of a fixed income. I felt myself become angry as I was subjected to the indignities of being rejected by others because I am Black, because I am a woman, or because of the blind person or the openly gay person I was with. I felt myself becoming unwilling to acknowledge my oneness with the addicted person or the homeless people sleeping on the benches in the park. We all build those boundaries. We build them for our own protection, continually fortifying them with our fears, with our pride, and with our self-righteousness. And when we do this, we are ignoring the other great lesson of all the mystical traditions, including our own, that the individual self is an illusion of sorts, and that until we see and feel ourselves as part of the whole of creation, we won't truly know ourselves fully. We will continue to fight the internal battles and struggle to let go of ourselves, never fully able to connect across divides to create beloved community. And unfortunately, limit our capacity to experience those transcendent moments, be they small or significant. This week's blog from interviewer and author Krista Tippett resonates so fully with what I wanted to say today. She wrote, "This is an age of devastating tumult. It is an age of magnificent possibility. Much is breaking. Much is being born. The two go hand in hand, and that is one of the deepest and strangest, most terrible and most redemptive truths of human reality. Joy and sorrow are woven fine." Later in her message, Tippett asks if we will be with her as comrades in seeing things deep and whole, and so keeping open the possibility that wholeness and healing are what we grow and live into. Seeing things deep and whole requires that we not get so wound up in the drama that grabs our attention every day, but to take the time to breathe in the moment, to see the sacred in the ordinary, so that we can be inspired and perhaps find that transcendent moment within the million little miracles that happen around us each and every day. Our souls need nourishment in these times, but we have to be open to being nourished. There is time for action, and it comes soon. But there's also time to take care of ourselves and to build the resilience that we will need as we move forward into these unknown times. Thank you so much for being here. I want to share a couple of announcements with you. There are certainly a lot of things going on in the congregation right now. If you look at the email that came out this morning that shared the link to this service, there are connections to just about everything going on and all the information you would need. There's a coffee house this Wednesday. Progressive Voices is starting soon. There's a forum next Sunday. There's lots of things going on. The news about the congregation, the church grounds, is that there was a water leak under the pavilion that required us to turn off the water, and therefore there's no water available in the congregation for anything, kitchen, bathrooms, or anything, nor was there water available perhaps for any kind of fire suppression. So it was unsafe to open the building, keep the building open, and here we are online. It is expected that that will be fixed hopefully by Monday at the latest, and we'll see. So keep your ears and eyes open for that information. And with that, I will suggest that if you have any kind of momentary generosity for the congregation, that again, you go online and you find that little donate button, and perhaps maybe a little donation for today in gratitude for these people who we've shared this time with. I will certainly allow everyone to open up their microphones and speak any kind of truth they want in the form of a crazy coffee hour. But I'm afraid if we do that, it's just going to be a whole bunch of sound out there. But I am grateful for everyone's presence today. I look forward to being with you in person next week and or online, as we all are. I should tell you that our AV tech Dan Goodsid is back in town. He's had a couple of good days. He'll be with us next week, and so we promise a successful online presentation next Sunday, as opposed to the difficult times we've had the past 2 weeks. So thank you all for being with us. I'm going to just leave turn off the recording and leave the screen open for just a little while if anybody wants to say hi to anybody else that they see online. I wish you a wonderful day. Go in peace. Oh, I do have closing words. How about that? Hold on. These are inspired by Sarah Morris Campbell, another Unitarian Universalist minister. Throughout our days, there comes to us glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight, breathtaking experiences of connection and clarity and wonder. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are and be renewed by their grace and, spurred by the depths of meaning they provide, move boldly into the unknown. Go in peace, go in love. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.